So hello and welcome. Kim Knight here from kimknighthealth.com, doing a very impromptu Facebook Live. I want to talk today about the quick fix and why we need to understand that it's important to demystify and demyth and not expect necessarily a quick fix if we are looking to get well. So as I always do at the start of my webinars, I like to say that I do not diagnose, cure, treat or heal anyone. I teach people how to heal themselves or to bring themselves back to health. And if you need appropriate medical attention from a therapist or a medical practitioner, please go and seek that out for yourself. And please just use the information I share in the wisest way possible for you. Always check out and test out anything. It has to be right for you. It has to be meaningful for you. So if this is one of the first times that you've seen one of my videos, what I do is I specialize in helping people to identify the root cause of their emotional pain, their unhappiness, their chronic illness, chronic symptoms. That's why I'm called the Kiwi Health Detective, because I really dig deep to look at the underlying reasons for the illness. So what I want to do in this quick video today is look at why quick healing fixes or quick fixes may be unrealistic for most people, and why actually wanting and expecting a quick fix can even slow down our progress and our recovery, and some tips on what to do instead of wanting and attaching to this quick fix. So why do we want a quick fix, and what is a quick fix? So a quick fix is when we want our symptoms to be gone immediately. So these could be physical symptoms, or they could be more mind, emotional symptoms, some form of unhappiness or illness. And because it feels uncomfortable and maybe even painful, we just want it gone. And that is quite natural. That is normal to not want to be ill, to not want to be in pain. And the amazing thing about the body is that when we're not in pain, when we're not sick, we tend to take it for granted, because we don't walk around thinking, or most people don't anyway, thinking, oh, I'm well, I'm well, I'm well. Whereas when we're ill, we really notice that we have symptoms, because those symptoms are drawing our attention through the pain. And they're meant to do that. They're designed to get our attention. So we want to be well as quick as possible, and we just want to be rid of the pain. And of course that is the mind telling us, okay, I don't want this pain anymore, and that is quite normal and quite natural. However, actually expecting that to happen immediately can sometimes be unrealistic, as I'm going to show you. So why do we expect this quick fix? Well, a lot of this is down to our Western society healthcare system, where, and I don't know if this was the same for you, but it certainly was for me. I was brought up in a society and a system where all I knew growing up was going to the doctor, and either I would be given a pill or an ointment, or I would be told to have an operation. Those were really the three options that I was given. And that is what I did for the first 30 years of my life. So I had my tonsils out when I was 8 because I had sore throats. I had my appendix out because I had appendicitis, although I'm not saying that sometimes we don't need operations, by the way. I probably did need an operation. You know, we get the flu and we take some medication. We have high blood pressure, so we take medication. And usually when we take medication or we put an ointment on, say we've got a rash, we put an ointment on, usually our symptoms can alleviate pretty quickly. But the problem is, this is only putting a plaster on the problem. It's actually not solving the problem. It's only addressing the end result. If we don't ask deeper questions as to why these symptoms are here, all we're doing is addressing the end result, which is the symptoms and the pain. Now, as I said, we want the pain to go. We don't want it. And that's all fine. But if we just put a plaster over the wound and we don't actually treat the cause of the wound, then it's actually not going to affect a total healing. And often what will happen is if we mask those symptoms over there, then they're going to turn up in something different over here. It's like our body is incredibly intelligent. It will do whatever it takes to get our attention to learn what is really causing this symptom or this illness, and what do you need to do to actually take away the root cause of the dis-ease, because that is what disease is. It is a state of dis-ease. So we're taught in our society, and I certainly was, that, you know, it's a pill, it's an ointment, it's a surgery, and you don't have to think about it. You don't have to question anything. Well, this isn't going to work, okay? Not to affect full, complete healing, because people who do this, often then they have to stay on that medication for years, maybe for the rest of their life, which means that the problem has not really been addressed at a fundamental level, because the problem is ongoing. And unless, you know, that person continues to take that medication, then the symptoms will come back. So we know that the problem is not being addressed at a fundamental level. So here's a reality check. In my experience, working with hundreds of clients over the last 12 years, I would say that 5% of people actually experience what we would call a quick fix. And my definition of a quick fix is that within 1 or 2 weeks, that person's life is dramatically better, or maybe even their symptoms are gone completely. But I've only experienced that in about 5% of clients. Now, even though people may have been ill for a year, 10 years, 20, 40, 50 years, by the time I see them, if we do the right work, normally they can turn their lives around significantly, either to 50 to 100% within 3 to 6 months, which is pretty good, bearing in mind that some people have been ill for years. But even so, I would say that only 5% of people that I work with really turn around in 1 to 2 weeks. So why is it? Why is it that some people need longer, and why is it that a small percentage of people can turn around really, really quick? Well, there's a bit of an X factor here, which you know, nobody knows. But I'll give you a couple of examples. I remember working with a lady once who came to me, and she had been diagnosed with chronic fatigue, and she'd only actually had it for about 3 months, which is a relatively short amount of time compared to many of the people that I'm working with. And she had no idea, the doctor had no idea, couldn't help her, so she started looking for alternative solutions. And in the first session, she told me something that she had never told anybody else. And that was that she had been sexually molested in her teens. Now, the relief of actually telling somebody that, rather than holding it in, all the pain, the hurt, the anger, and all the emotions that had actually built up to this chronic fatigue, that the relief of doing that in that first session was so big that within a week her symptoms had gone from, I think it was like 9 out of 10 to about a 2 out of 10 rating. And within 2 weeks they'd completely gone. Now that was because that was all that person needed. That was the missing piece. I had another lady who, again, very unusual recovery time. She'd been ill for 20 years with fibromyalgia, and within 2 weeks all her pain had gone. And the reason was that she saw and understood through the work that we did, through the investigation that we did, she became very clear on what it was emotionally that had created the physical symptoms. Because there's a direct correlation between how we feel and how those emotions change our body chemistry and symptoms, in particular symptoms of pain and fatigue. So she just got the missing piece as well. But in general, I find that most people need longer. So why is it that we need longer? Well, The reason is that we need to ask ourselves, why have I got ill? What is it that's happened that has created some trauma or some stress in our psyche? What is it that I need to heal? What is it I need to let go of? And once we've done that, then the body will self-rectify. But it can take time for that to happen. And often, symptoms can be held in place also by our behaviors and our habits. So, for example, if we have a habit of working 60 hours a week, or 80 hours a week, or 100 hours a week, that is not healthy for the body. And so it's going to be putting it into a huge amount of stress, which then can turn into symptoms. So until we change that habit, the body is not going to be happy to make us well again. And this is very intelligent, because ultimately, if we're putting our body, in this example, under a huge amount of stress by working 100 hours a week, our body is literally telling us, you cannot keep going like that. Ultimately, I cannot keep you alive if you operate like that ongoingly. It is our body's incredible intelligence telling us, you cannot operate me like that. And we tend to forget that our body is not a machine. And even if we did see it as a machine, that machine needs to be taken care of. And often most people, they clean their house and they look after their car better than they look after their body. We take our body for granted, and we take it for granted until something goes wrong, and then we've got to do some repair work. So often we're damaging ourselves for years without realizing it. And this is the problem. Our body is incredibly resilient. It will put up with a lot for a very long time. But eventually, it will break down if we keep breaking it down. So here's an alternative approach. We need to ask ourselves, why are my symptoms here? Why am I unwell? What is my body trying to tell me? These are the questions that we have to start to ask. And we need to find out, what is it that I need to do differently? What is it I need to change so that my body doesn't feel the need or the necessity to send me symptoms anymore? So, for example, one of my habits was to get up in the morning and to get on my computer straight away at 6 or 7 in the morning. And I'd go, okay, I'm just going to check my emails for 5 minutes. And then I'll have breakfast, and then I'll go for a walk, and then I'll go outside in the fresh air. But my mind got so caught up in the emails that I would be sitting there for 3 hours. And 3 hours later, I would be sitting there. My body would be screaming at me, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I want to go outside, I want to have some exercise, I want to go for a walk, I want fresh air. And my mind would override, as the mind does, and it would ignore my body's needs. So I had to retrain myself to not do that. And I can assure you that took quite a while, because it's an addiction. Doing activities like that and not being able to not do them is an addiction. So we have a lot of addictions which most people don't even realize. In fact, being stressed is an addiction. So we have to make changes. And that takes time, because they say it takes a month to change a habit and at least 3 to 9 months to actually embed that habit so that it becomes the new norm. So also, it's really important to understand that symptoms have intelligent meaning. They're never random. Most people initially, before we come across this type of approach to healthcare, we just don't question why we have symptoms. We just think they're a mistake and that they're random. But symptoms are never a mistake. The body is far too intelligent to make mistakes. So we have to ask, okay, that's interesting. Why is my body sending me that pain? And there will be a reason, but often it's very hard to see it ourselves. And there are 2 reasons for that. A, we have what is called our dark side of the moon, which is where we just don't see parts of ourselves however much we want to see them, because as we move around the moon, there's always that dark side. And the other part is that if you're not trained to know how to look and understand these connections, then it's just difficult to do. I mean, if somebody was to ask me to do complicated accounts, I wouldn't have a clue, right? That's not my area of expertise. So once we get a clear understanding of the psycho-emotional, environmental, behavioral causes, then, and we clear them, then our body will self-rectify. Now, also, it's really important to let go of expectations of time deadlines. This is very, very common, and it was something I did. I was unable to work for 10 years with chronic fatigue, and every few months I would put a deadline on getting well. Okay, I'm going to be well by Christmas, I'll be well by Easter, I'll be well by my birthday. And then at some point I just had to give up the deadline because I could see it was quite clearly not working. And I replaced that question with, okay, what is it I need to do to get well? What is it that I need to change? What is it I need to learn? And that will actually paradoxically get us well quicker. So one of the things that happens is that if we expect ourselves to get well in a certain period of time, and the lessons are not learned in that time, or the healing that we need to do is not done in that time, that puts a very unrealistic expectation on the body-mind, because it knows that it just can't do it in that time. And so it puts this additional stress on the body, which actually slows down the healing process and the progress. So my advice to people is always to let go of expectations of how long it will take. Now, I know it's really inconvenient, it's painful, it's not pleasant to be ill. I totally get that. But if you put your focus instead on what is going on here, what am I feeling, what is it I need to find out about myself, what is it I need to understand about my life, all these questions instead, then paradoxically we will find the solutions that we really need to find, and then our body will self-heal. Also, it's important to recognize that symptoms can take years to build up. Even though they may not appear for, say, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they have been silently building up inside, underneath, behind the scenes. This is very, very common. Now, usually before the symptoms actually appear, we will have had prolonged periods of stress and also trauma. So we will have had prolonged periods of stress and trauma, which normally, in my experience, it all starts in childhood and then it just carries on. So, for example, it's very common for somebody to have quite a traumatic childhood or certain traumatic childhood events, and then this leads them to create certain habits and lifestyle behaviors, such as always pushing themselves, overachieving, working too hard, expecting too much of themselves, never standing up for themselves, all these sort of behaviors. And they're constantly stressed, stress. And they keep going for a certain amount of time, but at some point the body goes, okay, that's it. I'm going to break down now. I just can't continue like this. And the body starts to produce noticeable symptoms. Now, normally that's the point where people say, oh, I got ill at that point. No, if we track back, we're going to find that actually the real stresses and the traumas which set the foundation for the symptoms later on, those initial stresses and traumas, they started many, many years earlier. So we need to put things in perspective and see that illness takes years to build up, and therefore to expect, say, 20, 30, 40 years of stress and trauma and finally illness to be turned around in 2 days or 1 week by taking a medication or having a surgery, well, this is just the wrong approach, okay? Now, I'm not saying that we don't need surgery sometimes or medication, by the way. That's not really for me to talk about that. That's the domain of the doctors. But in my experience, we need to look at everything. Everything has a place. Every approach has a place. And yes, sometimes we really need that surgery or that medication. But we still need to look at, even if we have those, medications and surgeries, if we're wise, we will look at, okay, what is the bigger picture here? What has my body been trying to tell me, and how can I help it in different ways? And maybe that's changing our diet, maybe that's doing more exercise, but a big part of it is going to be looking at, okay, what are the stresses and the traumas that have been going on in my life that I haven't been attending to, that my body is now telling me that I need to pay attention to. So that's just a quick overview of what I call demystifying and demything this quick fix expectation. I highly recommend that people let go of this expectation of getting well overnight and having deadlines on getting well, and instead turn your attention to what is it I need to learn, what is it I need to change. I hope that's been helpful.